So Jesus was passing through a village, and a woman there named Martha opened her home to him. Now Martha had a sister named Mary who was seated at the Lord's feet, listening to every word he said. But Martha, distracted by all her preparation, came to Jesus and said, "Lord, don't you care? My sister has left me to do all the work by myself. Tell her to help me." And Jesus said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things. Only one thing is necessary. Your sister, she's chosen the better part, and it will not be taken away from her." Now, we're familiar with that story, right? We've even discussed it together in church on more than one occasion. I bring it up again today because when Martha came to Jesus, she called him by a certain title. Do you remember the title? Yeah, Lord. And then she said, "Don't you care? My sister's left me to do all the work by myself." And then she said, "Tell her to help me." Who is being the Lord to whom? Now, I'm not saying you can't say what you want from God. Actually, I really recommend specific praying. Make a list of, that perfect partner you desire to experience in your life, or, describe the house that you believe God wants for you, whatever. Those specifics are awesome. And to pray about those, to ask for those. But it's different than telling God what to do. Tell her to help me. So in the context of not telling God what to do, but making requests of God, and in the context of calling God Lord, that's where we are today in this Sunday. I think that's our invitation. It's not only to call him Lord, but to relate to him as if he is Lord. I think we forget really easily that in the first century, that Jesus was Lord wasn't just some phrase. It wasn't just some thing that popped out of people's mouths. To say it was a statement of rebellion against the government. To say that Jesus is Lord says you wanted anarchy. It was to say, I'm choosing to not bow to the emperor, which was a big deal. And so when people said Jesus is Lord, it was a huge statement of ownership, of belonging, of trust into someone else in their lives. Now, there are many passages of Scripture that speak of people talking to Jesus and saying that he's Lord. I think of Matthew chapter 8, when the leper came to Jesus on his knees and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." And Jesus, full of compassion, reaches out and touches him and says, "I am willing. Be clean." That's a different use of Lord than Martha used it, right? Well, Martha ended differently. I think Martha got Jesus' attention by saying Lord, but it was a very different approach, right? Or what about Saul? Saul, who became Paul in the book of Acts, who is persecuting those that follow Jesus. And then when he has his lightning experience and falls down under the light of God, the scrutinizing light of God, and says, "Who are you, Lord?" Isn't he saying that this guy that has stopped him is a bigger dude than he is, right? And can you imagine his shock and amazement when the voice from heaven says, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Now, if he's persecuting Jesus, that would have been confusing to Paul because he thought he was persecuting people that had the wrong idea about who God was. So we've looked at how other people use the name Lord, and then we come to the passage in Colossians where Paul's talking about how big God is and the greatness of the character of this Lord. And that's what we see in the Colossians passage, this amazing character of Jesus and how big he really is. And that's why I want you to hear it again. We look at this sun and see the God who cannot be seen. We look at this sun and see God's original purpose in everything created, for everything, absolutely everything, above and below, visible and invisible, rank after rank after rank of angels, everything got started in him and finds its purpose in him. He was there before any of it came into existence and holds it all together right up to this moment. And when it comes to the church, he organizes and holds it together like a head does a body. Now, isn't that good news on the church? As we look at this year and our congregation, our church here, that God holds us all together. And in this transition year, that's really good to remember, that it's not up to you or to me to hold things together here, because we've got Jesus, and he holds it all together. What would it look like if Jesus really had lordship, like rule, sovereignty, supremacy in every aspect of life? What would it look like? What would it look like if he really was in charge over narratives that we tell ourselves about ourselves? Like, I've needed that help for years. And what would it look like if he really was Lord? If we checked every narrative with Jesus? What do you think, Jesus? Is that the truth? What do you think, Jesus? Is this the truth? So what if he was Lord, ruler, over the stuff we think in our heads? You know, Paul wrote that in the book of Corinthians. He says to take captive every thought to the obedience of Christ. Isn't that what that is? To allow every narrative to be filtered through who Jesus is and what he thinks of us. What if our emotions were captured by Jesus? I know some of you told me stories about the arguments in the car on the way to church. This is like from your childhood, where the mom and dad and the kids, everybody's mad at everybody else. And then when you get out of the car, you have to put on the happy face to come into church. I think that we have been trying to develop anyway a church that doesn't act a certain way, but is a certain way. That's called authenticity. So like if we're having a bad day, let's have a bad day together. Let's not just put a face on that says it's not a bad day. But that's a tendency, right? That's a characteristic. Hold up the image. Pretend everything's okay. I think that is such a reality of so many people's stories, that church was a place to fake it. And then everything else, like literally all hell broke loose outside of it or at home. So what if Jesus was Lord of our emotions? If we checked emotions with him, if we let him see into our hearts by those emotions? What if we put choices in the context of Jesus and asked him what we should do with choices that we make in this life? Speaking of allowing our choices to come into the lordship of Jesus, I have an acquaintance of ours who is the brother of a very good friend of ours. Our good friend lives in California, but this acquaintance, her little brother, lives in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. And he is a man now that has really struggled with weight. Like, he was up to nearly 800 pounds, which is a scary amount of weight for anybody to hold. And he dropped down 300 pounds, which is a lot of weight, down to like 400 and something pounds. So he's a big guy and has struggled with that for a while. He has a girlfriend, he's living with his girlfriend, got mad at his girlfriend, wanted to get back at her because he was mad at her, and so made this choice to go walking on the sidewalks of Phoenix barefoot. So I don't understand the logic of that action at all, but he goes walking on the streets of Phoenix and got not just 3rd-degree burns on his feet, but 4th degree. And I don't even know how degrees work with burns. I just know that 3rd degree I thought was the highest you could go, so that you can go to 4th is a concern to me. So this dear man, I mean, what a bad decision, right? I'm not sure that the logic of it, again, I say, I lose the logic. Because now he's in the hospital with 3rd and 4th degree burns. He may have trouble walking. He may not walk again. Who knows? And this was to get back at his girlfriend because he was angry with her. And it might have been better to have a good talk and say, hey, when you said that, it caused me to feel really awful about myself, and here's the narrative I'm running in my head, then I'm going to go walk on the street so I can get back at you. Wouldn't that be a bad idea? I mean, wouldn't that be a better choice than what he did? So what if our choices, all of our choices, came under the lordship of one who says he loves us the most and likes us the best and wants the best thing for us? Many of you know that I'm involved in the Christian ashram movement, and I've been involved in it since 1981. And it is a movement, a retreat movement that was begun by a missionary named E. Stanley Jones back in the 1930s. He was the Billy Graham of the 1930s, so he was a generation before Billy Graham and was world-renowned evangelist. Worked mostly in India and then a ton of work in the United States as well, but also went around the world on missions, doing evangelistic crusades in literally the generation before Billy Graham, so 1920s and 30s and 40s, and then on into the 70s here in the States. But he developed the Christian ashram movement around the reality that Jesus is Lord. This symbol, holding three fingers up this way or this way, began to be the symbol for the Christian ashram. I know for me it was a symbol for Boy Scouts, but it's a Christian ashram symbol, and it means Jesus is Lord. It can be a way of greeting people at the Christian ashram when we have a silent time before morning devotions in the morning, and so like from 10 p.m. until about 7 a.m. And so if you meet anybody in that time, generally you just like greet them with, Jesus is Lord. Here's what E. Stanley Jones wrote. My faith has been reduced to simplicity. Jesus is Lord. If you tell lies, you have to have a good memory to cover up the lies. But if you tell the truth every time, you do not have to have a good memory. You just tell the truth. That is simple. My life answer has been found. I have an answer which is the answer, and it works. The universe and life approve of it. Jesus is Lord. That is the greatest reduction from complexity, simplicity I know. The whole of religion in general, and the whole of Christianity in particular, reduced to these words, these three words: Jesus is Lord. As we spend some time in the book of Colossians and we unpack more the reality of who Jesus is and the hope that he is for us, the might and the beauty that he is for us, I just invite us to allow him to have lordship in our lives. Allow him to lead, to guide, to be someone that we follow, that we listen and obey the prompts that he speaks to us. Never forget, Bonnie, when you told the story of riding on a bus and having God say to you, write a check in this amount and give it to that person. And Bonnie didn't argue with God. She just wrote the check in that amount and handed it to that woman that she only knew because she rode the bus with her every day. They didn't really know each other, though I think they knew names. I'm not sure about that even. But, I mean, Bonnie wasn't like a conversationalist on the bus. She was like listening to headphones, probably not even headphones, just reading or whatever you do. But on that day, God spoke, and she wrote that check and handed this woman, and it was in the exact amount of a bill that they needed to pay. Guys, Jesus is Lord. Let's obey him in the simple places of life. Just obey him. Listen and obey him. Listen for him as far as those narratives go in your head. Listen for what you're believing, what you're saying about yourself, and allow Jesus to rewrite the narratives. The emotions that you feel, listen for him. Take them to him so you don't dump them on somebody else. The choices that you make in life, listen and follow his lead. Jesus is Lord. Thanks for letting me jump into your life while on vacation and share that with you. I love you guys.